Ford has just made a decision that will haunt them for the next decade, yet almost no one is talking about it. When I first uncovered what was happening behind the scenes, I could hardly believe it. But before I reveal Ford's biggest mistake, there's something crucial you need to understand. This isn't just about cars anymore. This is about the survival of one of America's most iconic automotive brands. Not long ago, Ford's F-150 was nearly impossible to find. Dealerships were empty, prices soared, and waiting lists stretched for months. Fast forward to today, and the situation has completely flipped. Ford dealerships are now overflowing with unsold inventory. Even the Mustang, their legendary flagship, just posted its worst sales year in history, performing worse than its original launch in the 1960s. Meanwhile, Ford's CEO insists that everything is fine. What makes this different from anything we've seen before? After spending the last decade analyzing the auto industry, I've never encountered a pattern quite like this. The numbers tell a different story, and what I'm about to reveal exposes a seismic shift already shaking the entire automotive market. Over the next few minutes, I'll break down why Ford's latest strategy is failing spectacularly, uncover the hidden numbers they don't want you to see, and explain what this means for anyone considering buying a Ford in the coming years. But first, we need to examine the past 24 months to understand how Ford ended up making this disastrous decision. In 2020, for example, every F-150 that rolled onto a dealership lot was marked up by $5,000, $10,000, and occasionally even $15,000 over MSRP. People were actually paying these prices, and the dealers were making a fortune. But Ford was watching from the sidelines as all this extra profit went straight into dealer pockets. This is where things get interesting, rather than learning from this situation. I recently visited a Ford dealership and saw an astounding row after row of F-150s covered in dust, Broncos sitting untouched for months, and their new Ranger, which should be flying off lots, just sitting there. However, we must first examine what happened in the last 24 months that led Ford to make this disastrous decision. Ford made their first critical mistake when they believed that people would pay anything for their vehicles. Then, year after year, F-150 prices crept up, and the new Mustang launched at the highest price point in history. Even the affordable Maverick began pushing $33,000 for basic trims. The statistics paint an even more unsettling picture. When asked about the Mustang's record, low sales and high prices, Ford CEO Jim Farley recently made a statement that demonstrates just how disconnected leadership has become from reality. He said the car was priced right. Let that sink in for a moment. Mustang sales fell 43% in Q4. The Mach-E electric SUV is now outselling the regular Mustang dealerships are offering up to $13,000 in discounts just to move inventory. But here's what's really concerning. While all of this was going on, Ford's CEO Jim Farley was telling investors that everything was fine. This disconnect between Ford's leadership and market reality was just the beginning. What happened next would set in motion a chain of events that would lead to their biggest mistake ever now. To understand the full scope of what's happening at Ford, we need to look at 3 critical warning signs that everyone missed. Warning sign number 1, the F-150 pricing disaster. For decades, the F-150 has been Ford's cash cow. It's not just a truck, it's the backbone of their entire business. But something changed in the last 2 years. Ford kept pushing prices higher and higher, thinking their customers would just keep paying. The result, dealership lots started filling up with trucks nobody could afford. I walked through a dealership last week and counted 4 full rows of F-150s. These weren't just display models. These were 2024 trucks collecting dust. The salesperson I talked to admitted they still had so many 2024 models that they're not even sure when they'll start receiving 2025 inventory. But here's what's really telling: the only time these trucks started moving, when Ford was forced to offer massive discounts. We're talking $12,000, sometimes $13,000 off MSRP. Suddenly, in the last quarter of 2024, F-150 sales shot up. Shocking, right? Lower prices led to more sales. Who would have thought? The Mustang disaster is the second warning sign. Not only is the new Mustang having trouble, but it is also breaking records for all the wrong reasons. To put it in perspective, Ford sold 44,000 units in 2024, which is less than they sold when the Mustang was first introduced in the 1960s. What's even more embarrassing is that the Mustang Mach-E The electric SUV that true Mustang fans despise sold 7,000 more units than the Mustang itself. Not only is there a decline in sales, but there is a fundamental change at Ford. To understand why, let's examine what Ford did with the new Mustang. They raised the base price considerably and replaced the traditional double-hump dashboard with a huge screen that no one requested. They also disregarded what their core customers truly wanted. When sales fell, Ford responded by doubling down and insisting that the car was priced correctly, which is warning sign number 3, the silent inventory crisis. This is where things get really interesting. When the Bronco first came out, you couldn't find one anywhere. Dealers were charging $20,000 for them, and people were actually paying for it. Now I can show you rows of Broncos sitting on dust-covered lots. The same is true for the Ranger. The new design is possibly the best-looking Ranger ever made. But they're not moving, and even the Maverick, which was meant to be Ford's more affordable truck option, is sitting on lots longer than ever before. However, this situation is unique. This brings us to Ford's biggest error. The company is dealing with something far more fundamental that goes right to the heart of their business model, rather than just a pricing or design issue. Before I tell you exactly what this mistake is, you must realize something important. This isn't just about Ford making a poor business decision. It's about a fundamental misunderstanding of where the entire automotive market is headed. The evidence supports this claim, which is that their inventory problems are getting worse rather than better. Last week, Ford made an announcement that confirmed my worst fears. Their pricing strategy is completely backwards, and their product planning seems disconnected from reality. Henry Ford literally revolutionized manufacturing to make cars affordable for his own workers. This philosophy transformed the automotive industry and made Ford one of the most successful companies in history. However, Ford is now systematically pricing their entire lineup out of reach for their traditional customer base. And they're doing it at the exact wrong time. This is a catastrophic mistake that Ford is making by completely abandoning their core market in pursuit of a premium positioning they can't sustain. Let me break this down, because what's happening here is unprecedented in automotive history. Take a look at their entire lineup. The F-150 Lightning electric truck starts at $50,000 and can easily reach $80,000. The base model of the new Mustang GT costs $55,000. For mid-level trims, even their reasonably priced Maverick pickup is now costing over $35,000. Good luck finding a Bronco for less than $45,000, but this is where Ford's strategy goes terribly wrong. In addition to raising prices, they are actively decreasing the value of the vehicle. For example, the interior of the new Mustang has lost its iconic design elements in favor of generic screens and digital displays. The timing couldn't be worse. Interest rates are at all-time highs right now, and they're charging premium prices while providing less of what originally made their cars special. The average monthly payment for a new car is more than $700. Although competition is more intense than ever and real wages aren't keeping up with inflation, Ford seems to believe that they can become a premium brand overnight. They're attempting to compete with Mercedes and BMW on price, but they lack the luxury experience and brand equity to support this claim. The numbers show that average transaction prices for Ford vehicles have increased by 38% since 2019. Customer satisfaction scores are falling, brand loyalty rates are declining for the first time in decades, and market share is eroding in key segments. Genuinely devastating. The auto industry is undergoing its most significant transformation since the advent of the assembly line, electric vehicles, autonomous driving, and new mobility models. Instead of utilizing their strongest asset, their connection to middle-class America, Ford is abandoning it, and the results are already showing that traditional Ford customers are moving to brands like Hyundai and Kia. Ford is burning bridges with their loyal customer base at the exact moment when they need them the most. Ford's dealer network is having trouble with unsold inventory, and the average age of Ford buyers is rising. I recently spoke with a Ford dealer in the Midwest, and he told me something startling. For the first time in 30 years, he's having customers walk away from his dealership, not because they can't get the car they want, but because they just can't afford any new Ford. This isn't just a pricing issue. It's an identity crisis. Ford is attempting to change who they are, and losing sight of what initially made them successful. They are compromising long-term sustainability for immediate financial gain, and the harm to their brand could take decades to fix. But the situation gets worse. The consequences of Ford's error will soon affect the whole auto industry. So if you're considering purchasing a car in the upcoming years, not just a Ford, you should be aware of what will happen next. First, we'll see Ford battle with an identity crisis. They're stuck in automotive no man's land, and their electric vehicle strategy is a prime example of this. Unlike anything in their history, they're too costly to be a mainstream brand, but lack the prestige to be a luxury brand. The F-150. The electric truck market was supposed to be revolutionized by Lightning, but instead it's sitting on lots with price tags that would make a Mercedes dealer blush.